Hello, notes. I am Grix, and this is my parade of ignorance. Yes, let's go back to Hegel. I just arrived yesterday. There's only one day between my last video on Hegel and this one, but I'll make sure to not post them one right after the other to not overwhelm you with the most unreadable book that there is. Every time I read a paragraph from this, I can see how it could be summarized in 2 words. And the argument, the reason why you would not do that is perhaps so that it can just, like philosophy, because it's trying to be systematic, it's trying to justify every single claim. So you want to say the sky is blue, but you cannot just point at it. You have to sort of like follow all the premises and explain the chromatic, the whole chromatic scale in order to arrive at the obvious conclusion that the sky is blue. Also for claims that are not. In this case, the sky is not blue. It's pretty much gray because I am in the UK. I'm no longer in sunny Spain. So yeah, let's go to the book. I read a little bit, and I'm just gonna stop wherever I wrote anything on the sides and look at what I underlined and read it to you. And that's pretty much my approach for this read along. I'm just following my own traces throughout the book after having read it and sharing them with you. So there will be a bit of repetition with the previous video because I don't want to jump ahead without maybe looking at some of the paragraphs that support the claims I made in the previous video, but not much because I don't want this to be another 40-minute video. It really doesn't deserve 40 minutes so far, this to me, which is not to say that it's wrong or anything like that. I think it's very interesting. I think some of the things that are being presented here are very interesting to think about. It's just so long. Okay, so let's get started. If it's long for me, I guess it's long for you as well. But yeah, as I said at the very beginning when I was presenting this read along, I didn't say, come and join me on a very fun and very quick read along that we're gonna do. No, I said, if you are also masochistic, then do join me on the most masochistic read along that has there probably ever been in booktube. So yeah, let's look at paragraph 76. I wrote some things on the side, so I'm just gonna read them if I can. Yeah, I have already said which you have to look at the first video if you want to look at the specific book that I'm reading from, but it's a translation from A.B. Miller with analysis and text from J.N. Finglay, Hegel, Phenomenology of Spirit, and I don't know the Oxford University Press, of course. So yeah, I think this is the most like, at least in Europe, in English countries, this is the one that you will encounter every single time. So I guess you will be already familiar with this by this point. If you are watching this video, I'm imagining you have the book next to you already. So go to paragraph 76. And let's just summarize it with a couple of my own notes on the side. So, philosophy starts with the premise that you are going to guarantee the incapacity of science. To do science, you must avoid things that promote the incapacity of science. So there is a contradiction between these two claims. Let's see if I've said anything about that contradiction here. Truth is the thing that knowing is after. And philosophy is supposed to be after knowing, but in cancelling the incapacity of science not as scientific, as the scientific discipline, but science as sort of like a coherent framework to explain reality. One needs to avoid whatever is on the way of that. Namely, one must avoid the presupposition that cognition is an instrument that sinks to its object. So it's telling you to mistrust perception. That's probably the source of many people's contempt towards philosophy. like and here there's a note that says, and this is not a note, this is just underlined, this is Hegel on the same paragraph 76. But science just because it becomes, no, just because it comes on the scene, is itself an appearance. In coming on the scene, it is not yet science in its developed and unfolded truth. In this connection, it makes no difference whether we think of science as the appearance because it comes on the scene alongside another mode of knowledge, or whether we call that untrue knowledge untrue knowledge its manifestation. So it's telling us that science is an appearance because it is backed up by cognition, which we are supposed to mistrust. Appearance in the sense that you are thinking as ghosts, as aliens, as things that are not, that appear, but also in the sense of like ephemerity, in the sense that they come and go. It's the Greek connotation of the word appearance, impermanence. Yeah, that's it. So let's see where are we going with this. I have another note on the, yeah, here is another quote. In paragraph 78, natural consciousness will show itself to be only the notion of knowledge, concept of knowledge, or in other words, not to be real knowledge. But since it directly takes itself to be real knowledge, this path has a negative significance for it, and what it is, in fact, the realization of the notion counts for it rather as a loss of its own self. For it does lose its truth on this path. The road can be therefore regarded as a path of doubt, or more precisely, as the way of despair. And I wrote on the side because such attempt is a kind of failure, a constant auto-negation. That's, I think, referring to the dialectic, the fact that in order to move forward in explaining reality, one has is a process of negation, and negation. So I guess that is where the failure comes in. Now in paragraph 78, I think, still, yeah, in next page. The series of configurations which consciousness goes through along this road, in reality, the detailed history of the education of consciousness itself to the standpoint of science. Yeah, this is the Bildungsroman, the idea of a learning experience. The science that this book is presenting is a learning experience of consciousness about itself, about the idea of knowing. It is only through the series of failures that one arrives at the understanding of what knowing is. That's what I wrote on the side. And then on 79 you have I'll talk about those failures. Then we have further on, also on 79, after they have been enumerated, not after they have been enumerated, but just the 79 is about the failures that they keep talking about. And here is where the dialectic really comes in. Says, for it is only when it is taken as a result of that which it emerges that it is in fact the true result. In that case, it is itself a determinate nothingness, one which has a content. This is referring to, again, what we talked already about, the dialectic process, in which the middle point, the first negation, is a realization of the nothingness, the supposed nothingness of the first affirmation. If the thesis is negated, then there is a nothingness. That's the shock of the deception of perception. But is that nothingness a waste of your time? Let's see what Hegel or what I have to say on the side. Each failure yields its failure yields the conclusion of the dialectic. One example, knowledge. One second, let me decipher, because my writing is not great. So if you have an object and you identify that object as an apple, and then it happens to be a pear, then knowledge does not equal apple, right? That is the nothingness that is left behind. So if it amounts to nothing, that does not yet mean that that it did not move you forward in the dialectic process, because its failure yields the material for a successive proposal. Imagine a 3-step ladder. The first step gets you on from the ground into the ladder or into the stair. The second step doesn't really get you anywhere, and the third step gets you into the next floor. Now, the fact that the middle step does not get you anywhere other than somewhere else within the ladder doesn't mean that it doesn't have pretty much the same value as the other two. It moves you forward in the same, with the same strength and the same distance than the other two. You don't feel the change because you are still within the dialectic process, within the progression. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's very obvious. Now, on the other side, I also wrote another. Yeah. So what we have in this process is in contradiction, you can unify proposals. You have a criterion for knowing, then you have its contradiction, and then you have a successive proposal. And that is the dialectic. Consciousness, however, is explicitly a notion of itself. Thus, consciousness, and here I'm skipping a lot, suffers this violence at its own hands, that the violence of self-negation for a further affirmation. Consciousness offers a criterion and then contradicts it. It destroys its own worldview. And yeah, I also don't think there is anything to explain there. We have at the beginning of I skipped this whole quote. So something I highlighted here is, but the goal is as necessarily fixed for knowledge as the serial progression. It is the point where knowledge no longer needs to go beyond itself, where knowledge finds itself, where notion corresponds to object and object to notion. Notion you can exchange for concept if you prefer. Hence, the progress towards this goal is also unhalting, and short of it, no satisfaction is to be found at any of the stations on the way. So it loses itself in order to be found. And once it moves through all of these failures, consciousness becomes explicitly the notion of itself. The notion, the concept, the notion or concept is not a notion of a particular concept. It is a grasp on the very mechanism of conceptualizing, and therefore the concept of itself equals to the true thought about itself, self-knowledge. And that, again, is what is the process presented in this book, and therefore you would expect to arrive at self-knowledge, at knowledge of knowing, at the concept of itself, of yourself, of the object itself, at the end of this book. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna skip a lot here because I wanna get off the introduction into the first chapter. I think we did already the first chapter, didn't we? Let's just move forward. In chapter 9, we have the knowledge of knowing, which is at the start, or it is immediately our object, cannot be anything else but immediate knowledge itself. A knowledge of the immediate, of what simply is. Our approach to the object must also be immediate or receptive. We must alter nothing in the object as it presents itself. In apprehending it, we must refrain from it to comprehend it. This is still talking about what we were saying yesterday. I realized that I started a little bit further back, so I want to push forward because what I wanted to address today is the second chapter, and I'm still in the first chapter. So you know things by a sensation. Things simply are. The sensation is receptive, and insofar as it is receptive, it seems to be the richest kind of knowledge. Is it also real, not mediated? Which it is, and that is the reason why we would expect that from it to be the richest kind of knowledge. What you know through sense certainty is pure being. But truth is not pure or simple because there is more complexity to it than the this that we talked about yesterday. The this has two features, has the here and now, again, in refers to a plurality of possibilities. This is in chapter, in paragraph 92. Now, in paragraph 96, well, paragraph 96 talks about the Hegelian nouns. I'm going to skip it, but it's all about the different forms of now in a Hegelian sense. And then in chapter 97, talks about why actually that intuition of certainty being the richest kind of knowledge is actually wrong. And it is because it cannot say what it means, because when you in sensing you conceptualize, in conceptualizing you universalize. Remember what we said in the previous video. The particular contains the universal. Through the particular we arrive at the universal. You cannot make inferences about an object without making it about universal concepts. You have a bowl and you say it's spheric. That's something that I can, through sense certainty, I can discern. But so many other things are spheric. So this is, I mean, this is Platonism. The idea of sphericness is somewhere, somehow on the sphere, on the ball. So it is an instance. The ball is an instance of sphericness. Maybe if the ball is soft or hard, it's an instance of hardness, of softness. So those concepts expand way beyond the ball. So sense certainty doesn't really get at the particular, and therefore it betrays its own functionality, its own purpose, which is to get at it. And because of that, it doesn't really, it cannot say what it means. Then in 98, it talks about the universality of the here as well, how here equals universality. In paragraph 100, we have the immediacy of truth comes precisely because I know it. It comes precisely because it is known by the I, with no intermediary. I'm really pushing forward because we already did all of this. Yeah, there we are. That's it. And now, have I gone too far? Yeah. So yeah, now we are in chapter 2. I skipped a couple of pages, I didn't realize. So yeah, let's talk about the immediacy of certainty a little bit more. So we have, in 111, immediate certainty does not take over the truth, for its truth is the universal, whereas certainty wants to apprehend this. Perception, on the other hand, takes what is present to it as a universal, just as universality is its principle in general. The immediately self-differentiated moment within perception are universal. And I wrote on the side, the I takes the wall as an instance of wallness. This is exactly what I was saying a minute ago. And the here as an instance of here-ness. Truth is universal, the particular is not known. And then further down on 112, we have this it does showing itself to be the thing with many properties, the object, whatever object we are picking, is the thing with many properties. The wealth of sense knowledge belongs to perception, not to immediate certainty, for which it was only the source of instances. For only perception contains negation, that is, difference or manifoldness within its own essence. So the object of knowledge is the object of that thing that has a multiplicity of particularities. The universal seems to be the universal seems to be a diversity, and the particular is the universal, in the sense that, like, because we cannot grasp the particular, when we get at the object as an instance of the particular, we find it to be the universal, and then in that universal we find a diversity of particulars. So we never really get at the individual thing. The cat is black, but it's also furry, and it's also four-legged. But the cat is not four-leggedness, is not furriness, is not blackness. The properties of the cat escape the cat. It's exactly what I was saying. The dog is one, and it presents a unity of its properties. It must be in presenting this unity of properties, it becomes distinct from all other things. That is the individuality found in the diversity, found in the universality, found in the object. This is also, I mean, we are in paragraph 113, but this is also from 117. And I'm not gonna stop a lot thinking about that oneness, but we do need to address it a little bit. So what we have here is, I become aware of the thing as a one, and have to hold fast to it in this its true character. If in the course of perceiving it something turns up which contradicts it, this is to be recognized as a reflection of mine. The thing is a one, and we are conscious that this diversity by which it would cease to be a one falls in us. So, in point of fact, the thing is white only to our eyes, also tart to our tongue. It's referring to a grain of salt. Also cubical to our touch, and so on. We get the entire diversity of these aspects, not from the thing, but from ourselves, and they fall asunder in this way for us, because the eye is quite distinct from the tongue, and so on. We are thus the universal medium in which such moments are kept apart and exist on its own, through the fact then that we regard the characteristic of being as a universal medium as our reflection. We preserve the self-identity and truth of the thing, its being one. So, far from the universality of things being a hindrance or an obstacle in getting at the object, it's only that we can talk about the object because of its universality, because of its many properties. And then in 121, talking further about these properties, says, the thing itself is the subsistence of the many diverse and independent properties. Thus we say of the thing, it is white, also cubical, also tart, and so on. But in so far as it is white, it is not cubical, and so far as it is cubical and also white, it is not tart, and so on, positing these properties as a oneness in the work of consciousness alone, which therefore has to prevent them from collapsing into oneness in the thing. To this end, it brings in the insofar. In this way, preserving the properties as mutual, as mutually external, and the thing also, and the also. Quite rightly, consciousness makes itself responsible for the oneness. Okay, let's stop there for a second. This is an example of, it brings in the insofar. So what he's trying to say is, the triangle is triangular insofar as it's not square, insofar as it's not spheric, insofar as it's not cylindrical. I don't know why, but that is what this paragraph tried to say. This is the lack of clarity. This is the philosophical contempt toward its own readers that I will never understand, and that is slowly pushing me away from this discipline into more grounded forms of argumentation. But yeah, another way of a more philosophical way of explaining that is X is X insofar as it's not Y. And what it's trying to get at there is like also the negation. Every object is the negation of every other object. If you take the world and you take glass away from it, the space that is left, everything that is not glass, is sort of like a bridge to glass. Let's get to the next. No, I think we are still in 121. Let me just. Yeah, 122, nothing. Yeah, okay, just to finish here, let's go at 127, 128. Pretty much there's 7 paragraphs here that kind of go at the same thing. I'll pick a quote from, I'll read 128 and 129, and some of my notes, and we can leave it there. Because I feel like with the previous video, many of these things are already kind of clear, and it's not like it's not like these sort of claims should be very hard to grasp. What is hard about this book so far, in my opinion, is not the contents, but the form. It's just the fact that this is might be a great philosopher, but definitely a shit reader or a shit writer. So let's get at 128. The object is in one and the same respect the opposite of itself. It is for itself so far as it is for another, and it is for another in so far as it is for itself. So basically, the object is itself insofar as it is grasped through something distinct. It is one and many at the same time. Then in 129 we have from a sensus being turned into a universal, but this universal, since it originates in the sensus, is essentially conditioned by it, and hence it is not truly a self-identical universality at all, but one afflicted with an opposition. So the criterion is to understand the object as a sample of a universal truth. And the first part, the first sentence, from a sensus being it turned into a universal, is kind of like what we talked about in chapter 1. And the second part of that quote is can be sort of explaining all universals appear by way of sensation. The properties are discerned through the senses. Thus, the universals are conditioned by sense experience. That's it. I don't think I have, no, because then we get in chapter 3, which I haven't yet inquired into. Because what we do in philosophy is not reading. I cannot say read. This is decipher. Partially because of philosophy as a discipline, and partially because philosophers and how bad they are at writing. It's painful to see. I wrote here a note the other day that I forgot to read in the previous video, and I think it's a great summary of everything that we've seen so far and of this book and its goals. So I'll give it to you as a final conclusion. and we can wrap up with that. The perception is a quality of the subject. Properties are qualities of the object, but they are perceived as they are manifested, but they are perceived by perception, which does not receive them as manifestations isolated, but as universalities, instances of the universal, which are part of the unity of the object. The thing is received as an individual, a one, but always in reference to the properties that interact with other objects and present universality. A grain of sand tries to be a one, is perceived as one, but it is a part of a whole, and even in a world with no beaches and no deserts, the grain of sand would continue to be in relation through its properties to other things, by being cubic or being cubical or being small, because there are things that are known for these qualities as well. So it will be known in reference to everything that is and everything that is not small and cubical. Which is to say that for the object to be able to exercise its independence, it has to relate and oppose to other things. If you had an apple in the universe and there was absolutely nothing else, nothing to relate towards or against, it would lose its individuality. So to understand the particular, we need to grasp the universal. And not only do we need it, but we can't help but do it. It's an mechanic, pretty much inevitable process of grasping the universal through the particular and then getting back at the particular through the understanding of the universal. And this is why this book has the promise that it has of understanding knowing as a whole, because if the particular and the universal are contained in this dialectic process, then you can understand everything through the apple. And that's it. Yeah, I mean, there you go. That's the phenomenology of the spirit so far. Let me know if you are enjoying the beautiful prose like I am, and let me know what you think. Do you think it's nonsense? Are you a monist? Do you think an apple in the universe by itself, with nothing else to relate towards, with nothing to perceive it, absolutely nothing, would itself remain apple? Would itself have any individuality at all? Would it be still graspable even though there is nobody to grasp it and nothing else to be grasped? Is also, because it's kind of like on the background, but is then perception required for the existence of things? Is the real construct of perception, or is it independent? Are you a realist or are you not? Yeah, any other thoughts? If you're going to talk about any paragraph, if you happen to be reading this with me, which I think nobody is, but I have, I have some trust on the continuity of YouTube, the fact that this video will remain there for the time being, that at some point some lost soul will arrive here and be like, oh, this is just what I needed. Someone reading Hegel without being a Hegelian, and without even being a philosopher, because more than philosophers, we have philosophers, people who just has a philia for philosophy, but doesn't really approach it as critically as the concept of philosophy and the premises of philosophy should be approached. Yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you, Victor.